My name is Mansoor. A number of things collectively, more from Dr. Azmi. And it leads to point that the concept, the terminology of marriage equality itself and the law behind it also seems to be flawed, considering the point you made that Aboriginals' marriages are not recognized by the Constitution or by the law. So this whole concept of marriage equality as a law remains flawed because it does not capture a significant element of the society. So it is skewed towards a particular outcome rather than the word, the terminology which carries its meaning of equality in marriages or making marriage equality. I think are not we inclusive in that respect, or are we ignoring it deliberately, or why this thing has not come forward in the main conversation around the media and so forth? I mean, I find it, for me it was an eye-opening statement from you. I never knew about that one. So maybe many people around the corner would or would not know that the Aboriginal marriages are not recognized in the I find it very disturbing, and with the large majority of the population has not even discussed this thing as part of the right of the marriage equality law, for example. I find it very disturbing. Yeah.
So, is it not a comment for?
I think we should change the law in its own right, because the law itself is flawed. It carries the wrong meaning in using those two words, which are actually not inclusive of all the equality which bound to be in the marriage of equality.
When I started my talk, I stated, and I'm not sure whether I expressed it very clearly, that marriage equality applies mainly to immigrant societies. The whole of Anglo-Australian law is premised on the exclusion of Aboriginal people. I mean, the rights of immigrants is premised on the terra nullius fiction that we didn't exist. And because we didn't exist, we didn't have marriage, we didn't have love, we didn't have men, we didn't have women, we didn't have anything. So the land became open to colonization. So all of these issues about Anglo-Australian law relate to Anglo-Australians and to immigrants that they welcomed into their communities. It has, by its very beginnings, excluded us, not only in marriage, that is one element. Our humanity was denied. I mean, we were regulated under the Flora and Fauna Acts in society. So, I mean, that is a much bigger issue and a much bigger question. But I think for the purposes of our gathering here, that's why I made that particular exclusion, because I find a lot of what people say about my own people quite, offensive. But for the purposes of this discussion here, I think marriage equality is within the limits of the Anglo-Australian law. It hasn't recognized Aboriginal customary law or marriage or anything that goes with it, and it's a long way. I think we'll have marriage equality as a done and dusted issue 100 years on before Aboriginal equality is contemplated in its fullest meaning. I mean, we can't even get recognition into the Constitution, and this is something that the law requires for its own existence, and they can't do that, not yet. So thank you for your comment, and I'm very grateful to you as a black person on this land to hear you say that. But yeah, it's a different argument.
Can I just make a point here? Sorry for that. Because Chris has identified that only 6,000 families which are affected by this law. Is that what you added?
No, that's his family.
630,000.
With children.
13. Was it 630,000?
Okay.
Whatever the number.
Around the 500,000 mark.
6,300. same-sex parents with children, but there are many more.
6,000.
But there are many more
That number
LGBTI
was
people.
Same-sex marriage parents, not
The point I was making in statistical terms, Aborigines are about 500,000, if I'm correct, that's my understanding, is 500,000 in the total population.
300,000.
300,000, you see, which is still is in terms of number of people affected by law on the marriage equality are not less by any means the people who are actually affected or being affected or to be affected by the law. So I think that itself nullifies the law on moral ground and on constitutional ground itself. It is a law that is flawed in the first place.
I wonder if there's a bit of confusion in terms of not that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people can't marry, it's customary marriage is not recognised.
So we have to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have to marry under immigrant law. We can't, well, we can have our own marriage ceremonies, but they are not recognized as, say for example, gay people or Muslims can marry more than one person, one spouse. It can happen as a question of fact, but as a legally recognized institution, that is not possible under the current law. And the issue of Aboriginal people and the 300,000, it's a slightly different issue because there is a separate head of constitutional power that deals with Aboriginal people. And that is a whole separate argument. But in terms of numbers, people who identify as LGBT are about 1 in 10, I think. It's about 10% of the population, whereas Aboriginal people are less than 3% of the population. So, I mean, democracy doesn't work for us. We've known that for a long time, you know. But that's also a separate issue. But if it's just in terms of numbers, then LGBTI people are significantly more numerous than us. Yeah.
But the question, I think I'll have a question.
I think Wayne wanted to say something in response.
I was just going to add, you can imagine as a society we're having a great deal of difficulty just talking about is marriage between a man and a woman or between people of the same sex. And I think that's perhaps all we can manage at the moment to talk about. If we were to have a conversation around should marriage be entered freely or should marriages be arranged? I don't think our culture could cope with that conversation. I'm also not sure we could cope with having a conversation around plural marriage. So those kinds of issues might be a lot further down the line for those communities to whom they're significant. So yes, it might be a case that marriage equality for everyone is going to be a long-term kind of project as communities begin to wrestle with some of these issues around what love means, what equality means. But I think men and women is perhaps the place to start.
Thank you. We had a question down the end.